Hi there, my name is Matthew Blades, the host of Learn from People Who Lived It.
And I'm Dr. David Leicken, a psychiatrist in town here who specializes in mood disorders and trauma.
He's a good one. We like him. A couple of weeks ago, we were in town. We were actually right here at Eric's house recording a podcast with Marianne, the founder of Eric's house. We started this place after the sudden loss of her son. You and I were both really taken back by all of the great things that are happening there, but there was one kind of thing that stood out to you.
Yeah, this place really serves a niche in the community. For people that are suffering with depression and substance use, there's help available. But when you have a sudden loss, I think a lot of times family members don't know where to turn. They try to rely as best as they can on each other. They try to deal with grief in their own way. But sometimes you need some expert advice or be able to talk with somebody that's gone through it already. And this is where Eric's house really shines.
Yeah. Well, what struck us was, when you have a sudden loss, and I've experienced the sudden loss of my father who had a heart attack, and I know you've probably visited with hundreds of people who have experienced a sudden loss, but the thing about it is everybody in the family's hurting. Everybody up and down the road, the kids, mom, dad, aunts, uncles, everybody around you is hurting. And so how can you repair in a place that's really torn up? That's the question, right?
And I think it's particularly hard because sometimes people fall into traditional roles in the family. Sometimes some members of the family are more dependent. Sometimes there's somebody who is the fixer in the family. And when everybody is hurting, it's hard to tend to your own wounds and at the same time be available to other people in the family to help them heal.
Let's dive into that a little bit, because you hear this a lot when people experience loss of any kind. It's like, I have to be strong for my family. I have to be strong for my kids. I have to be strong for my husband, or whatever that is.
Right.
What does that really mean, though?
Well, I think sometimes people end up putting off their own grieving process and not allowing themselves to go through the steps necessary to heal and be able to move on. It's important that you take care of yourself in all of this. And it reminds me of the analogy when you're on an airplane, you put on your own oxygen mask before you take care of your kids, right? That's not selfish. You have to have something to give in order to be able to help other people. And so basic things, make sure that you eat, make sure that you're getting as good a night's sleep as you can. Just so that you can maximize your ability to help others.
Yeah, because that's important, right? When the world seems chaotic, those are the moments where we need to simplify our lives. And I like what you suggested, and I'm obviously a huge self-care advocate, and I love the idea of, get back to basics. Are you getting enough rest? Like you said, make sure you're eating some decent foods. Make sure you're getting social, as much as you might not feel like it, being around people, even if you don't have to use words. You and I have talked about that a number of times on our podcast. It's like, sometimes the best thing you might be able to do is just sit with somebody.
Right. And to have a friend that's outside of the family situation. Right? So if everybody in the family is kind of suffering with the loss, to have a friend who is a little bit removed from it, that they can be a sounding board for you or a source of strength for you.
And here's one of the things that I was just sitting here thinking about. There's this whole idea that if you lose somebody to substance abuse or suicide or some sort of an overdose, chances are there's been a little bit of a struggle leading up to it, right? And you find yourself in a place where after that's done, you're going to cycle through a whole bunch of emotions. So let's talk about one of them right now, and that one is the anger emotion, which is so strong for so many people, right? You get mad at them for making the choices that they made that ultimately led to their thing. Okay to feel that?
Right, absolutely. I think people go through, why didn't you reach out to me? Or, why did you do this? Or in a situation where it's a spouse, why did you leave me with this mess, now that I have to deal with? Anger is a very common part of the grieving process. And you have to let yourself go through those emotions, feel those feelings, and try to find a productive outlet for it.
Yeah. So let's start to wind down here and talk about this idea that is super strong on my podcast, Learn from People Who Lived It, which is the idea that you're not alone. There's loads of other people that are going through this type of thing all the time, and you all just need to find each other, right? Eric's house is a place that kind of brings them together. But speak to therapy and speak to counselors and speak to, people needing to lean into that.
Yeah. Getting support from family members is helpful and important. Getting support from good friends is important. Sometimes things don't go back to a balance that you want. Sleep oftentimes is one of those things that suffer when people are grieving. Maybe there might be a role for medication to help restore sleep temporarily until things get underway. Sometimes when depression is interfering with the ability to get basic things done during the day, maybe there might be a role for an antidepressant.
I've had the pleasure of interviewing 80 plus people about all different types of trauma. And we've had more than a few people who have experienced sudden loss. And I'll tell you, if there's one thing that they all agree on, it's this idea that talking about it is what they would prefer. Saying their name is what they would prefer. Asking them stories about their loved one is what they would prefer. Because so many of us don't know what to say, and so we end up saying nothing. Speak to that a little bit.
As a friend, it can be hard to know what your role is in that situation. A lot of people that I've talked to are afraid to say the wrong thing.
Sure.
They don't want to open up a door and then have that person fall apart in front of them. It's okay to ask how somebody's doing. If they start to cry, that's okay too. Trust that the other person will set a limit with you and tell you when you're going too far, and kind of respect their distance if they want to, stop at some point. But reach out, make yourself available, call and just check up on them. Even if they don't want to talk.
Yeah.
Sometimes just going for a walk together and not saying anything, just being in each other's presence and just knowing that support is there is comforting too.
Carrie, episode 1 on my podcast, she says that specifically. She says she lost her son to an accidental overdose. She said, I wish that I would have just gone into his room and sat on his bed and just sat there. And just waited for conversation. I didn't need a motive. I didn't need to ask him about anything. I wish I would have just gone in and sat there until something happened. That can be so powerful. Yeah. You think? Yeah. Well, we appreciate Marianne and Patty asking us to be a part of this experience. And the room that we're in is Eric's room. We're actually in Eric's house right now recording this. And we're looking at pictures of Eric and his blue polo with the tan stripes and then that great smile on the picture below him. And it's clear we lost somebody way too soon, which is usually the case for all of these things. But it is incredibly comforting to know there's a place like Eric's house that you can turn to. We all can turn to. If it ever there is a point where we need any final thoughts.
Yeah, if you come to Eric's house, you're going to find people that have gone through their own struggles. They have experience and wisdom that was hard won that they have to offer. And they'll help you find your way through.